Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with the 217th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We've got a special 1 hour segment here that we're really honored to do with the great Steve Donziger and Charlie Cray from Greenpeace. Hopefully Natalie will be joining us. We, as you all know, had just a major horrific court verdict against Greenpeace in North Dakota for God knows how much money, pocket change for Elon Musk, but $660 million, something like that. And we are really honored to have Charlie Cray with us, who's been a Greenpeacer since the beginning of time, and Steve Donziger, one of the great American heroes from the Chevron case, which we'll touch on briefly, and this Greenpeace battle in North Dakota, which is staggering. We're going to devote the full hour to it. Hopefully, we're going to be joined by Steve's cohort, Natalie, another attorney central to the case. Let's start. And this is for all the Pacifica folks out there for Progressive Radio Network. Natalie Segovia has just joined us. So we have Steve. You've been with us before, Steve Donziger. You are an attorney based in New York City. You won a phenomenal judgment in Ecuador against Chevron, and Chevron came back at you. And well, you can describe what they've done to you. And then when we'll turn around, we'll introduce Natalie and then Charlie Cray. It's great to have you. We're really honored. And we're going to do the full hour on this because this is a full frontal assault on the global environmental movement, as well as on Greenpeace. By way of disclosure, I was hired in 1991 to run the Greenpeace nuclear campaign. I served as a senior advisor, and now, 34 years later, I am a voting member, which is sort of the AARP of Greenpeace. So anyway, Steve Donziger, it's just so great to have you with us. Natalie, where are you?
Hi,
Natalie?
Harvey. Good to be on with you all. It is 11 a.m. I'm in the middle of the Pacific in a tiny island in the islands of the Honolulu Hawaiian island chain.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
aloha to you.
Aloha.
Mahalo for coming on. I lived on Maui for 6 months, and I'd go back in a heartbeat. Steve, tell us, please, about this trial, about this decision, and we'll go to Natalie and then Charlie, but give us the basics of this horrendous case. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Harvey. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. You're great. You're good.
Okay. So I'll try to first of all, thank you for that lovely introduction. Hello, Natalie. Natalie is a great lawyer who represents me vis-a-vis Chevron. Charlie is a friend who really got me deeply involved in the Greenpeace case. Basically, I don't know, a few months ago, several of us had major concerns about this trial that was scheduled to start in February. It did happen. It seemed like it was a very troubled kind of trial that was being, set up so structurally it would really almost guarantee a victory for the company that went after the energy pipeline company that went after Greenpeace out of the Standing Rock protests. So we formed this trial monitoring committee of prominent attorneys, including Natalie, Marty Garbus, Jeannie Mirror from the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, Jackie Dugard, who teaches human rights law up at Columbia, and several other people, Kip Hale, an atrocity crimes prosecutor over at the ICC. We got this group together and went out and monitored this trial literally every minute of every day. Charlie was there. Natalie was there for several days. I was there for several days. The upshot is this is really one of the most intense, largest SLAPP lawsuits, that is an illegal lawsuit, whose main purpose is to silence an adversary as opposed to really resolve legitimate legal claims. And this was a case designed to shut Greenpeace up, to punish Greenpeace. Natalie and I both believe, after watching this, she'll explain more, that Greenpeace is really a proxy, a stand-in for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, the Indigenous movement as a whole, the climate movement as a whole, and really the right to protest. Like, this was used as a setup to go after the entire movement. The size of the judgment and the claims, by the way, to me, are bogus on every level. Charlie and Natalie, I'll let them get into that. The size of the judgment is beyond the pale. There were no damages to this pipeline company. It's a $70 billion market value company. They make billions a year in profit. Their CEO is worth 6 or 7 billion. They're major Trump supporters. This is all just a bogus case, in my view, to try to really bring down Greenpeace and attack the entire climate movement. I actually believe, and I'll turn it over to Natalie in a second, but I really question whether Greenpeace is going to pay the first dollar of this judgment. I think it's all done largely for PR purposes. The jury was completely biased. It's a fossil fuel county where the trial was held. There was no way, in my view, Greenpeace could have gotten a fair trial in this county under any circumstances. 7 of the 11 jurors worked in the fossil fuel industry or had ties to the fossil fuel industry. There was no Native American on the jury. There was no person of color on the jury. The judge, seemed like he ruled consistently in favor of the company, almost always against Greenpeace on all sorts of evidentiary issues. Greenpeace did not get a fair shake. And I think for those reasons, I think there's a decent chance that on appeal to the North Dakota Supreme Court, Greenpeace will prevail and not pay anything. And I just want to finish by saying that Greenpeace, very creatively, Greenpeace International sued the company that sued Greenpeace in North Dakota over in Amsterdam in Dutch courts, seeking compensation for the enormous expenses that the organization has had to bear to really litigate this case for several years. I think that the question of whether money flows from Greenpeace to the company or from the company to Greenpeace is still very much an open question. And with enough engagement by the movement, with enough awareness, I actually think there's a very good chance this company is going to end up paying Greenpeace for damages caused by this illegitimate lawsuit.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears, as my mother used to say. So
listen. Let me just say this. I don't mean to say Greenpeace is out of the woods. Like, there's a lot of work to do to get to that point. But I also want to say and reemphasize the point that the Standing Rock Sioux were not sued in this case. They were not a party to the case. Their voices were not in the trial. There was a racist element to this, in my opinion, to what the company did to sort of just go after Greenpeace, when in reality, all the protests at Standing Rock, which gave rise to this case, because the company's theory was those protests damaged it by delaying the opening of the pipeline. All of those protests were led by the Standing Rock Sioux and with the support of literally hundreds of indigenous nations from around the US and the world. Like, it wasn't Greenpeace that did it. Greenpeace played an incredibly minor role, but they sued Greenpeace as a stand-in, and the whole thing just felt creepy and racist to me, not to mention the fact that sitting there in court, their whole narrative was just a lie. And which again, I'll let the others get into. Like, it was just a lie. And I'll say finally, like, I went through this myself. Chevron used the same darn law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, to sue me under RICO in retaliation for my role in helping indigenous peoples in the Amazon win a landmark pollution judgment. Sitting in court brought back a lot of feeling, because I also sat in court as a defendant, just like Greenpeace did, listening to a whole lot of false narrative BS that a judge worked with the lawyers sort of choreograph. Of course, I paid a price for it, but I got through it. And I think Greenpeace paying a price, obviously, but we'll get through it with the support of people around the world.
Well, let's talk about your case for a second, Natalie, if you don't mind, so that people know who Steve Donziger is. You went down, you worked with the Indigenous in Ecuador to sue Chevron for the horrendous damage they did with their fossil drilling in the Amazon. You won and stop me if I'm wrong here. You won a huge judgment with in conjunction with the Indigenous in Ecuador. And tell us what Chevron did next, for God's sakes.
Well, it's a long story. In a nutshell, they sued me for $60 billion, the most amount of money any individual's been sued for. The law firm Gibson Dunn that Chevron hired to do this to me, again, the same law firm that went after Greenpeace, they had a marketing plan that would market to their corporate clients. They still do. These are SLAPP lawsuits designed to shut people up. And, they had this idea of what they called the kill step, which was if they sued the vulnerable link in the chain, or like say the main lawyer, and knock the lawyer out, the clients, who are very vulnerable, as were the communities in Ecuador, would be left defenseless. And they could win by might, what they could never win on the merits of the claim. And that's what they're hawking to these corporate clients who are being sued and getting in trouble. So, I was the kill step to them, and they tried to destroy me. They tried to get me criminally prosecuted. The U.S. attorney would not prosecute me. So they basically sued me civilly under civil RICO on the theory that our entire work for 18 years in Ecuador was part of a racketeering conspiracy designed to extort money from them. They were accusing the indigenous group, who had been poisoned by the systematic dumping of billions of gallons of toxic water or production onto their lands, into their waterways. Their water supply was poisoned. They were accusing their victims of trying to extort money from them by working with people like me to do the lawsuit. It was a frontal attack on the idea of law, on the idea that we have a legal system that can hold abusers accountable. I mean, I will say it's exactly what we're seeing Trump do right now, by the way, writ large, with the legal profession, where he's basically threatening any law firm that sues the federal government. So, there's all this attempts by, I would say, the corporate sector, the oligarchs, to weaken the rule of law, to weaken the ability of the legal system to hold them accountable for their abuses. Certainly what happened to me is an example of that. Now, this happened to me, by the way back in 2011, 12, 13, and I'm still dealing with it. I still can't travel. I still don't, they deny me my right to leave the country. I haven't left the country for 6 years because of this case. But I really believe there's a direct through line between what Chevron did to me and what just happened and is happening to Greenpeace. The same law firm, the same playbook, and with the same goals.
Wow. Thank you, Steve Donziger, for telling us that, and Steve Caruso for putting up this great graphic here. Those of you in Radio Land, we're talking with Steve Donziger, NATALI SEGOVIA, and CHARLIE CRAY, the Greenpeace legal team involved in this horrific $660 million attack on Greenpeace, of which I'm a voting member. And it's truly, this is a landmark case. Steve, I'm really glad for your optimism. You are one powerful dude. We have 70 people with us, and we'll be going out on YouTube as well as to the Pacifica, Progressive Radio, and other networks. So, NATALI SEGOVIA, you're in Hawaii, and tell us how you fit in with us and what it was like to be. You were in what town in North Dakota?
Yeah, this was we were in Morton County, North Dakota, for the trial monitoring.
Okay.
But just to contextualize a little bit, and thank you for having me on, Harvey, and it's good to be here with Stephen and with Charlie from Greenpeace. I think there's been a lot in the mainstream media about this case. It has exploded overnight. So everybody that wasn't paying attention while this case has been litigated for the past 6 years and more. It was first filed in 2017 in the Federal District Court of North Dakota. The Federal District Court got rid of the case, right? And then it was refiled in State Court of North Dakota.
So the feds wouldn't hear the case.
They heard the case.
This is in a state court, not a federal court.
It was originally in federal court, but the federal court found that it was a frivolous lawsuit. They dismissed the case ultimately.
Wow. What a way to start.
Exactly. And with federal courts, they have the ability to take jurisdiction over the state law claims, right? It's part of how our federalist system works. They declined to do that. So what Energy Transfer did was they repackaged a lot of their same, kind of conspiracy claims, a lot of the tortious interference claims, the defamation claims that were in the original lawsuit, and then repackaged them and using state law and put that into the state complaint in North Dakota. And that's been, litigated over the past several years. Where I fit in, where the organization I lead, Water Protector Legal Collective, fits in. We began as the legal tent at Standing Rock. So we're really in response to the mass criminalization of water protectors, right? Individuals that were both Indigenous and allies that were showing up to Standing Rock. There were over 100,000 people that passed through Standing Rock between July 2016 and February 2017, right?
Standing Rock, of course, I'm sorry, but Standing Rock was the mass civil disobedience led by the tribes in the Dakotas to stop this horrific pipeline from schlepping crude oil across the country to go where?
Right. So this it's actually export. It's oil for export. It doesn't even stay really within the United States, right? So one of the important things to know about Standing Rock was that there were tens of thousands of people. At any given time, I think at its peak there was between 10,000 to 15,000 people at camp.
Wow.
And Water Protector Legal Collective was really, our founding mission was to represent water protectors that were being dragged into the courts of North Dakota to fight these criminal cases, the vast majority of which were also dismissed, right? These were trespass charges, these were obstruction of public highway charges, all kinds of different charges that really didn't stick. So one of the things that we're seeing in this case, in the energy transfer case was, and how I understand this, and is what Stephen was alluding to, is that, in great part, yes, this is about Greenpeace, but it's larger than that, right? This lawsuit was very intentionally about targeting the environmental justice movement as a whole. Greenpeace was a sacrificial lamb, fit the bill of being the largest nonprofit organization, environmental nonprofit organization practically in the world. That was its Standing Rock, but as came out at trial, there were 6 Greenpeace employees total that were at Standing Rock. Out of 100,000 people that came through Standing Rock, right? This was an Indigenous-led, peaceful resistance, prayerful resistance camp that was started by elders and youth from the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and the Oceti-Sakowin, which is the larger Great Sioux Nation, which is made up of 7 different Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota bands, right? So historically, we're talking about separate bands and separate tribes that make up this one larger Great Sioux Nation. This is also the same case, right? Or the same people, or tribes that went up in this landmark lawsuit in the Supreme Court, Sioux Nation versus United States, where the United States Supreme Court found in the 1980s that the vast majority of land that was subject to taking and settling by US settlers, right? American settlers that were moving out because of the gold rush in the Black Hills, settled on these lands that are actually, and that belonged to the Lakota people, right? Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, right? To the Great Sioux Nation. And the US Supreme Court recognized in that ruling that yes, those lands were treaty land. So when people said at Standing Rock, this is passing through, the pipeline passes through the unceded treaty lands of the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people, that's what they mean. These are treaty lands that were negotiated in a peace treaty between the United States and the Lakota tribes, the Oceti-Sakowin tribes, and these were not abrogated. They were not ceded. They were not given to the United States. They were illegally taken, right? And for that, there is compensation that the Supreme Court of the United States said we owe, as the federal government, the United States government owes the Lakota Nation money that is sitting in the U.S. Treasury to this day, because Lakotas will say, and they say, have said forever since this case got handed down, the Black Hills are not for sale. So all to give a historical context of where we're at and where this case fits in, right? And so prior to Greenpeace being sued, they did sue the tribe. They attempted to sue the tribe via the tribal chairman. They brought a lawsuit against former tribal chairman, right, the president of the tribe, Dave Archambault, and that got dismissed. So that didn't prosper, right? It didn't prosper going head on against the tribe. Tribes, right, have sovereign immunity just like the federal government, because it's a federal government nation to nation relationship, right, on a different level, and the states fall below that. So the fact that they went to Greenpeace and they went to other kinds of nonprofit organizations, that was sort of next logical step.
Right.
But how I see this is that this is still a proxy war against Indigenous sovereignty. It's a proxy war against Indigenous self-determination and against treaty rights. And at the end of the day, it's still about the water, because let us not forget that this pipeline is still operating illegally. It's still pumping oil without proper permitting. So the permits that were in place, when you look at the pipeline, the way the pipeline is sort of built, this is like, if this is Lake Oahe, right, which is the source of 891 federal, tribal, and state water intakes. This is Lake Oahe. They use HDD, or horizontal directional drilling. So they drilled horizontally and under the lake bed. So you have a pipeline running right under this source of water, which is the primary source of water for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. This is what water protectors were there at Standing Rock. They're like, if there is an oil leak, right, in this pipeline, we cannot drink the water. Literally, our future generations, and Stephen, you saw this firsthand in the Amazon, right? Like literally you have generations upon generations with malformation, with birth defects, with cancer, with all kinds of serious scenarios that have not been remedied. And there has been zero payment on that $9.5 billion judgment in the Amazon by Chevron. This is the MO of oil companies, of the oil and gas industry, of extractive industries, particularly in lands that are invisible and forgotten, that happen to be indigenous lands, right?
Right.
So this is what we were fighting for and what we have been fighting against since Standing Rock. Like that fight is not over. The pipeline is still pumping oil. It is operating illegally. The DC Circuit Court in 2020 said that, you know what, those permits under the water were fast-tracked without proper permitting processes. They're fast-tracked under the first Trump administration. And so therefore, they should actually not be operational, but they are. And the other thing that got left off, and I'm sorry to go on here.
Sorry, go ahead. I will note, by the way, that I have always considered Greenpeace to be a sovereign nation, but so far that hasn't fallen in court. But go ahead.
So what we're seeing is, you know, and all of this information, of course, didn't make its way into trial, right? Like the judge blocked every aspect of this. Like I mean, the fact that Greenpeace was on trial essentially for having one signature out of 500 on a bank track letter that led to the divestment of some of the financial institutions, that got in, but it was one signature out of 500, right? To put things in context, 6 people out of 100,000 that passed through Standing Rock. And, you know, they also didn't allow in certain critical pieces of evidence that have been made public, that are part of the public record, have been reported on widely. Particularly, there's a reporter named Mike Sorgan for E&E Politico, and he's done some really good coverage of the underlying issues in this case. Energy Transfer is a pipeline company that has been federally debarred from entering into contracts with the federal government, because at the same time that they were building the Dakota Access Pipeline in 2016, 2017, they were also contaminating the water in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and have been found criminally liable for environmental crimes of contamination of water through the drilling processes in Pennsylvania and Ohio. But you have a Pennsylvania Attorney General that was willing to open an investigation, right, into what had happened there. And they found out that, guess what? They drilled using additives, including hydrocarbons and diesel. So last I checked, and tell me, Harvey, if I'm wrong, but last I checked, you can't drink diesel either, right? Like diesel, oil, and water, it's a basic understanding.
Elon Musk has figured out a way to drink diesel, but otherwise, no. So, well, we have 80 people with us, Natalie. I want to go. It's a great presentation. Thank you so much. Charlie, I want to come to you, but Ruth Strauss is a medical doctor and knows her stuff. Ruth, do you want to jump in real quick, and then we'll go to Charlie Cray? Ruth Strauss, I got to unmute you here. Hold on. Not getting you unmuted. Okay, let's go to Charlie, and then Ruth will get you unmuted, and then Heidi will join in as well. So, Charlie Cray, you've been with Greenpeace and thank you again, Natalie. That was wonderful. Steve, this is really powerful stuff. As I say, we have 80 people with us. Charlie, go ahead, please. Were you there? You were at the trial. Were you at Standing Rock? Were you one of the 6 at Standing Rock before?
No, in fact, Harvey, I was not. Greenpeace was given a call after the protests were underway, after the tribal chairman talked with Tom Goldtooth, an old friend of Greenpeace's at the Indigenous Environmental Network, who gave Annie Leonard, our former executive director, a call and said they would like Greenpeace to come and provide some assistance, particularly send some trainers in nonviolent direct action, nonviolence because things were getting pretty intense. And
So
we did,
Greenpeace's role initially at Standing Rock was to train people in nonviolence, and that's what they
well,
got.
that was our major role, yeah, along with bringing equipment such as we have a thing called rolling sunlight. It's basically a trailer that uses solar power. You'd like that, Harvey,
Yeah.
to power people's phones there. It was in a remote ranch area, right? Or, far away from sources of power for people. So we contributed that. We brought in some materials for winterizing, some of the areas. So anyway, we have a couple of Indigenous folks on staff who led and are connected to the Indigenous Peoples Power Project, who led daily trainings. And Nick Tilson and others sat down with Dave Archambault and others from the Tribal Council, and they set some rules, basically principles that people would have to abide by to participate in and to learn from in those trainings, including no destruction of property and other principles. And that was actually shown at trial, the sign that was literally in front of the tent where people gathered for the daily trainings, which listed those principles. So they at least allowed us to introduce that and describe that. But basically, what happened during this trial is there really was no single piece of credible evidence introduced that tied and proved Greenpeace entities. And I say entities, but because there are three Greenpeace organizations that were defendants, the C3 and C4 in the US, and then Greenpeace International. Greenpeace Inc. and Fund in the US and Greenpeace International. Greenpeace International and Greenpeace Fund had no one at Standing Rock. Greenpeace Fund is a grant-making organization. Greenpeace International, of course, is a network of national offices and headquarters in Amsterdam. And so basically, I don't know where you want me to just, go, Harvey, with this. I could go on and on forever.
Well, you were there. Let's ask Ruth Strauss if we can get her unmuted, and then Heidi to chime in. Ruth is a regular with us, and she, as I say, is a medical doctor. She, I believe, is the only native from Alabama who's on our calls. And I can't get her unmuted. Mike or Steve, and we're joined by Julie Levine here. So this, go back to Steve Donziger. Where do we go next with this? Well, what's going to happen now? Oh, and I want to mention one thing before I forget. I want to remind everybody that Leonard Peltier is home with his family today. That's all I want to say. And Julian Assange. Never forget that. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
And me, by the way, I was detained too. Not to put me in the same class as those two.
Yes, and you.
Same dynamic. In any event, I get what you're saying. That's powerful. And by the way, those examples are all the result of people power. Okay. And I think it's a segue to what's going on here. Where are we going? Well, legally, there's the in-court stuff. And then politically, there's the out-of-court stuff. And I think people need to think about both and how they interact. In court, there's going to be all sorts of post-trial motion that the Greenpeace lawyers will engage in with the other side at the trial court level. By the way, in my opinion, this judge who did this trial failed in his duty to run a fair trial. So I don't expect much out of those motions, but a lot of what went on in the trial, since it really seemed hopeless from the get-go, were Greenpeace lawyers creating a record for the appeal so they could win the appeal. So there's going to be a period of time in North Dakota of, skirmishes. And then after that, there's going to be an appeal to the North Dakota Supreme Court, which is going to be a huge appeal. It will probably engage legal groups and advocates from all over the world filing amicus friend of the court briefs on behalf of Greenpeace. I'm sure the other side will get their Republican attorney generals to weigh in as well. And it's going to be a big showdown over the whole concept of weaponizing the law to try to silence the environmental movement and silence Indigenous people. That's what this really is about. At that point, I really hope Greenpeace prevails. There's so much to work with on this appeal. our independent trial monitoring group, of which Natalie is a part, along with the other lawyers, we're going to produce our own report about what we observed at the trial. There were so many flaws in this trial. Just to cite one example of many, there was no court reporter. There's no official transcript of this trial. This is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. The
How can
parties
they
did
do that?
I don't know. I've never seen it before, but that's another example of how really there was a concerted effort, according to what we observed, by the judge and by Energy Transfer to limit public scrutiny of this trial. This trial was almost like a secret trial. Like the only way you could observe it was to show up physically in this little town in the middle of North Dakota. There was a live stream, but it was made available only to lawyers for the parties, even though the state has a history of broadcasting high-profile trials with juries. Court TV even broadcast 2 trials. But of course, for this case, they wouldn't flip the switch and let either the public or the media watch this trial remotely, which made it very difficult to figure out what was going on. And if you combine that with a lack of a court reporter and lack of a transcript, it's extremely bizarre. But the way you explain that is the company worked with the judge, in my opinion. I think they're embarrassed about how unfair it was and how it would have looked to the public. They limited public access. In any event,
Well, one detail. You say there was a recording made that went to the lawyers?
There was a live stream that was only limited to like the lawyers or the parties, like the Greenpeace people back in Washington could watch it in their office. There was a limited number of people who could get access. It was not the public. Just to be
But
very
Charlie,
clear.
does Greenpeace have this recording?
No, there's no recording, Harvey. There was no actual recording of the live stream. Greenpeace, and my understanding is Energy Transfer, because there is no official recording, shared the cost of having a transcript generated on a daily basis that was not public for the lawyers only to refer to. And the parts that I saw were very, muddied, shall we say. But as Stephen said, there was the reporters committee rounded up a bunch of mainstream media, Dow Jones, Washington Post, New York Times, North Dakota Monitor, and others, and petitioned the court to live stream. Denied, then sent a writ to the state Supreme Court to live stream. Also denied. We also, Greenpeace, our lawyers filed a motion to remove the case from the South Central District in Morton County to another location, because there were a number of factors. Stephen mentioned the jurors' ties to the industry. Another thing that happened was before the trial began, somebody, and we believe it's the company or some proxy, sent mailers to households in the county and then put the same content up on a website that was targeted at the same audience. And those mailers had articles. It was basically what they call pink slime journalism. It portends to look like journalism, but it's basically paid corporate content, propaganda. And one of the articles in these on a regular basis would be "This Day in History," and there would be an article, coincidentally, only articles about the protests framed in a way that the propaganda that attacked the water protectors back then was framed. Allegations that protesters were violent, that they were paid outsiders, that they were hypocrites for not cleaning up the site and leaving trash, even though they were forced out so quickly that they were cleaning up when they were forced out, and then the company took pictures of what was left behind and claimed that they trashed the air. All that propaganda was recycled, to traumatize a potential jury pool. And most of those articles mention the trial. It was as if, well, guess what? Somebody could pay for this, for all of your trauma, And we filed a motion for discovery, an emergency motion for discovery in November to find out who was behind these. And the judge denied that. And lo and behold, coincidentally maybe, they kept publishing these, but they didn't mention the trial right after that motion. Gee, I wonder why.
Wow.
So, there was a lot of shenanigans that went on around this, not just in court.
Amazing. That's amazing stuff. And so, Steve, and then we'll go to Natalie. You're saying there's no coherent whole transcript available of the proceedings of this court. And Charlie,
I
what you
mean,
have Greenpeace or Natalie is not usable. Is that right?
what I was going to say is, I mean, I think I'm right about this, Natalie. Correct me if I'm wrong. Our monitoring committee was in there every day taking extensive notes. Like we're the only independent entity standing between a complete, jam job by Energy Transfer and the court against Greenpeace and the environmental movement and the Standing Rock Sioux and like the truth. Like we have the record in our notes, which we're pulling together for the world to see. But our notes are not a transcript. There needed to be a stenographer in that courtroom to take it all down as it occurred. That did not happen.
Natalie?
Yeah, they were private. I know the parties each had their own court reporters, but there wasn't like a public court reporter, right, where you can call up the court and say, "Hey, I want a copy of the trial transcript." I think one of the things, and thanks Charlie for all that background. I think one of the things that we're really seeing with this case is that it's part of how Energy Transfer has been operating. It's part of, as Stephen was mentioning too, the operational like MO of Gibson Dunn as a law firm. I mean, it's been rated I think there's a scorecard out there on like the top firms that are impacting climate litigation, and Gibson Dunn is rated like an F, right? Like they have a bad record in this regard. But they also have this long history of like anti-Indigenous stances, right? Like the fact that they were the ones, the law firm behind the private, like Chevron-backed private prosecutor Donziger, right? But they're also the firm that took up pro bono a case against the Indian Child Welfare Act, all the way, the Brackeen case, all the way up to the Supreme Court. So you're seeing that there's a pattern here, right? And it's part of a pattern of really trying to dismantle and create a dismantle an environmental justice movement and Indigenous-led movement. And then also create a legal record that is damning and damaging to the movements, right? When the vice president of Energy Transfer gets up there on the stand and says, "Oh, well, the tribe saying that their cultural resources and sacred sites were desecrated by the pipeline," and calling that fake news is reductionist at best, right? I mean, it's horrific and it's disrespectful and it's all the things, but it's actually like wrong on the law. There's federal laws in place that protect, tribal cultural resources. And that was just washed away because they get to just say that and use this catch-all term of fake news, right? So I think that there are some deeper insidious things that are also happening here. But the most insidious, I would say, and I agree with Stephen on this, is that ultimately, right, their biggest win is getting the movement as a whole to cower in this moment, right? To capitalize on the fear everybody is feeling in this moment, that's saying, well, if this happened in Green, the largest nonprofit environmentalist nonprofit organization perhaps in the world, how is my organization going to respond, or how is my organizing going to change, or how am I going to shift as an individual, as a private citizen, in the ways that I respond to things, right? And I think that is that was their ultimate goal. And I've gotten questions from reporters recently, like, how is your organization going to shift? And I'm like, if we shift because of this, right, that will be the ultimate win for them, right? We have to have in this moment, like, more unity and more solidarity than ever before. And we also have to have more courage. We have to know what is the law, what, legal compliance. We have to, be above the law in all things, and not above the law, like comply with the law in all things. But at the same time, like, know our rights and our responsibilities, and also have the courage that this moment requires of all of us to stand together, stand with Greenpeace, stand with the environmental and Indigenous-led movements that are under attack. And
Right.
it's not a new, but
Well, I
it's
think, we're seeing this administration's top agenda item seems to be to make everybody afraid of them. And this is a big deal. Now, you say also, and I'm going to get Heidi, Ruth, I still can't get you unmuted, that this is going to be heard in a Dutch court, an appeal. Is that correct? Steve, did you say that? Or Heidi?
No. So if I may, there's two
Please.
parallel things happening around the same case. Okay.
Okay.
One is the trial that just happened and the appeal to the higher court of North Dakota, and then like what I would call the US-based appellate process to overturn that judgment. That's going to play out here in this country. Separately, in Europe, there's an attack on the whole idea of this case in Dutch courts filed by Greenpeace International that seeks damages from Energy Transfer for using the SLAPP technique, which is illegal, not only violates the US Constitution, it violates various laws in the European Union, and that seeks compensation for all the money Greenpeace had to put out to defend against an illegal lawsuit. And the damages are not just money paid to lawyers. There's massive damages in lost staff time and being distracted from the core mission, which of course is one of the objectives of what Energy Transfer is doing. So there's two things happening at once: the appeal of the case, North Dakota Supreme Court, and maybe to the US Supreme Court, the attack on the case by Greenpeace in Dutch courts. I think that's accurate. Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, Harvey, what we all have to understand is that for years there have been SLAPPs targeting activists as well as journalists. And in the US, we have about 35 states that have what are called anti-SLAPP laws. For those who don't know what SLAPP stands for, Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. And in Europe, they have recently passed, due to action, a coalition called CASE, Coalition Against SLAPPs in Europe, an anti-SLAPP directive, meaning that every member state is supposed to adopt a law penalizing SLAPPs. And this case was filed by Greenpeace, first notifying the company and then formally filed against them under Dutch law following the EU directive. So this is going to be a test case of the EU directive. We've had, like I mentioned earlier, 35 states pass anti-SLAPP laws. In fact, there's a strong one in California that was applied when Greenpeace finally prevailed against a different SLAPP suit preceding this one. But North Dakota doesn't have an anti-SLAPP law. There is not a federal one, though Jamie Raskin has introduced a version of it in the past and intends to introduce it again, a federal anti-SLAPP law. And I should say, we notched one victory along the way that Natalie referred to earlier, which is that when this case was filed originally, it was filed as a RICO suit, a civil RICO suit, alleging that a bunch of individuals and Greenpeace and smaller orgs were engaged in a domestic eco-terrorist conspiracy. That's the part that got thrown out, the RICO part, after Greenpeace filed a motion to dismiss. And that's a very strong, I think, precedent there. They mentioned the word terror or terrorism 47 times in that complaint in that case. They don't mention it once in the current case, but I want to point out that the original law firm, Kasowitz, who happened to be another one of these Trump law firms, was replaced by Energy Transfer with Gibson Dunn, and their lead counsel, Trey Cox, described, at least until now, I think, I haven't looked at his bio page on their website, but he described this case as one in which Greenpeace is accused of instigating terrorist-like activities. So even though they're not legally accused, they're still playing those games with the, inflammatory rhetoric outside of the court. And I have to say, I mean, Natalie and Stephen were there in the court. They played inflammatory games in the court. At the end of the first phase of the trial, before closing arguments, they made this statement, and I don't know if it's going to be part of the record or not because our lawyers made a motion to strike it. But Trey Cox said, "Your Honor, we've seen all this evidence that these entities, Greenpeace, the U.S. ones, share the same address, share the same top executives, share the same phone number. Your Honor, we think this is evidence of criminal tax fraud," which is totally outside the boundaries of the case, probably should be the basis for sanction. But it's a dog whistle to the Trump administration with all these other attacks going on against NGOs. And Greenpeace has been, let me just point out, we have been audited before in the early aughts when Bush was president. The fossil fuel industry pressured them to audit Greenpeace, and our books are clean for that reason. They were clean then, but they're we know the risks, right? So this is what goes on at the end of the trial. And I want to say, just if you look at the jury verdict, most of it is punitive or exemplary damages. In other words, not what they were claiming for damages, but what the lawyers from Gibson Dunn wanted the jury to throw in as a penalty, saying, hey, we can't tolerate this behavior, and you, the jury, need to send a message. I think it adds up to something like over 400 million of the overall judgment are punitive.
Well, so now we have a situation where training people in nonviolence is considered terrorism. That's basically what it boils down to. You go out and train people to be nonviolent, you're a terrorist. Okay, so listen, we wanted to make this an hour package. You guys are spectacular. Thank you so very much. Steve Donziger, give us a quick update on your own situation, please, and then wrap, and then Natalie, and then we'll come back to Charlie, and we'll finish by the top of the hour. This has been phenomenal. Heidi, Ruth starts. I've been trying unsuccessfully to.
And can you hear me?
Heidi, go ahead for 1 minute, please, and then we're going to go to Steve, please.
Well, Ruth is unmuted.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Unmuted.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say that Steve and Charlie Greenpeace are like lightning rods for these, little anatomy people, if you know what I mean. But in any case, and Steve, you can send me checks for all the therapy I had to go to when my nephew started clerking for Kaplan. But anyway, I wanted to ask you you, Steve, did you have like jury challenges that you ran out of or whatever? I mean, some of this is wonky stuff, but that jury just sounds horrific. And then for Natalie, can you explain, I know there's something called forum shopping. How were you able to move your case from one level to another? But finally, please let us know what we can do for you.
Yeah, start with that. What can we do to support this Greenpeace and you, Steve and Natalie, and moving this ahead?
Okay, I'm gonna deal with that real quick. To learn about the case and to support our independent monitoring work, which I think is critical to this whole situation, we have a website called trialmonitors.org. Go to that. We just put it up. We've been doing this for 2 months, but there's a ton of articles. You can learn about what happened. We have a bunch of statements that capture some of the due process violations in this case. So that's how you can learn about our piece of this. In terms of Greenpeace, Charlie can explain it, but there's a really good website they put up called greenpeaceontrial.org, where you can learn about this from their point of view and you can help support Greenpeace. I believe Greenpeace needs to be protected in this critical moment by everybody in any way you can, including politically, spreading the word, following their website, following our website. And I also want to give a shout out to Natalie and her organization, which doesn't get near the attention it deserves. It's called Water Protector Legal. Sorry, what is it called? Water
Protector Legal Collective.
Okay.
Water Protector Legal Collective. Kind of rhymes.
Yes, WPLC for short. They need support. They are probably one of the leading Indigenous rights legal groups in the country. Natalie is a phenomenal lawyer, and I know this firsthand because she represented me on my pardon campaign and with various litigations with the Second Circuit when I was dealing with Chevron. So she doesn't get enough attention. Her organization needs more support. They need to hire more lawyers. I would say the linchpin to this whole thing is getting Indigenous peoples, Indigenous lawyers into the front lines of these cases, because those voices are getting lost. And those are the voices that it's, I think, hardest for some of these fossil fuel companies to go up against, because it just makes them look so bad. So I want to give a shout out to WPLC, and if people can support WPLC, please do. Natalie, what's the website? Is it WPLC.org?
I just put it in the chat. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks so much for that. I appreciate the shout out. I think, one of the things, just to Ruth's question, to clarify, Stephen and I are independent monitors, so we're not attorneys working on this case. But in my role as executive director and senior attorney at Water Protector Legal Collective, we're still doing the work to protect the water, right? So one of the things that we did was file into this case as a non-party intervener, which means we're trying to actually get documents that have been, part of the case in discovery that are related to pipeline safety documents. And we're a stand-in for the public, right? For everybody here that would love to see these documents that, Energy Transfer has put out through discovery that talk about pipeline safety and are just not public. I've shared some resources in the chat here for folks to be able to read.
Remember, we have a large radio audience, so please spell out very clearly what your website is so people can go.
Thanks so much, Harvey. It's www.waterprotectorlegal.org.
Waterprotectorlegal.org. And
Yes.
remember, when Ruth Strauss discusses anatomy, she is a doctor. She knows what she's talking about. Okay, Nancy, I'm sorry, Heidi, very quickly, and then we're going to wrap up. It's just an honor to Steve Donziger, one of the great legal heroes in American history. Natalie, great to have you with us. Charlie, you're a tremendous campaigner. It's really been great to work with you all these years. Heidi, very quickly, and then we want to make this a package, an hour.
Right,
So
I understand that. Can talk.
Go ahead. Heidi, go ahead, please.
So, first of all, I want to say thank you, Stephen, because I think you were part of the Pioneers legal class that that national laws of nature class that I took part of and asked questions of. I don't know, Charlie, were Melina Massimo Cree and Ariel Duranger some of the people that were on the ground in, because I was a Standing Rock keyboard warrior and was blessed to be friends with LaDonna Brave, Blair Allard, and Joy Braun before she passed away, and also with Doug McLean and also Cheryl Angel, who are still with us, and I tried to bring them on to the feed here too.
Okay.
So, but what can we do, and what is the, and I've also wanted to make sure, I'm sorry I'm so ineloquent, I've just been waiting.
Go ahead.
I want to make sure that people know that hundreds, if not thousands, of representatives from different world religions came to Standing Rock and created a holding space for the energy that needed to be kept there. And I wanted to know what people from different interfaith groups can do to help bring attention to this issue.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Really good. We really appreciate that. Thanks. We want to, Steve, and then go ahead, and then Natalie and Charlie will end.
I'll turn that over to Natalie, who was there and I think knows a little bit more about this.
Thanks, Heidi. I will just say, from my perspective, what we can do right now is to keep sharing information, and education is really critical. Knowledge is power, I know, is something that's thrown around, but it's more true now than ever when there are active misinformation and malinformation campaigns out there. There's plenty of people I run into every single day that know nothing about this case, that know nothing about Standing Rock, and know nothing about all of the issues that are still ongoing. There's a lawsuit happening right now between the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So just sharing information. I mean, I know Water Protector Legal Collective, our Instagram was just shadow banned, right? So like the visibility is a constant issue on these platforms, in social media, in mainstream media. So thank you for this space, Harvey.
Well, thank you. We're so honored. Steve Donziger, you're still under attack for your Chevron work. Years and years ago, we were hoping you would get a pardon from Joe Biden. I guess that didn't happen, but you're still being attacked. So tell us how people can help you in this case.
Thank you so much. And again, I repeat, my case is intimately connected to what's happened to Greenpeace. There's a through line, same law firm, same corporate playbook, same objective to silence those of us who speak out against corporate abuse, repression of indigenous rights, pollution of the environment, etc. So to help me, I'm still laboring under these attacks. I cannot travel internationally. In theory, Chevron could go back to the judge and try to have me charged again with criminal contempt of court and have me locked up again. I served almost, well, I spent almost 1,000 days in detention, 45 days in prison on a misdemeanor contempt of court charge with a maximum sentence of 180 days. I mean, talk about an abuse of power. It happened to me. Obviously, that pales in comparison to some of the other great heroes of our country who put up with a hell of a lot more. But the dynamic is the same. The playbook is still out there, and it will be used again and again and again if we don't stop it. I have a website called freedonziger.com, even though I don't have an ankle bracelet on my ankle anymore and I can walk out of my apartment where I am right now. The fact is I'm not fully free, and I need support, help, solidarity, just like Greenpeace does, just like the Standing Rock Sioux do. So if you want to help or learn more about my situation, go to freedonziger.com. I'm on the cusp, by the way, of probably filing a motion to get my law license back. I'm the only lawyer in the history of New York who had his law license removed without, on the basis of a civil court finding without a hearing. So the attacks on me, there's so many unprecedented attacks that the world has never seen before. And, look, the larger point is, the powerful actors in our society believe in the rule of law until it doesn't serve them anymore. Then they just nakedly discard it and go like right into the corrupt behavior. It happened in my case with Gibson Dunn. I think it's happened in Greenpeace's case with awful, totally unfair, farcical trial that we just witnessed. So it's important to understand the larger picture. This is a playbook. There is a law firm selling it to the corporate world. And those of us who are targets, need to be supported, because as Greenpeace goes, the movement goes in many respects. We all are Greenpeace at this point, because Greenpeace, again, as Natalie said, is a stand-in for much, much larger movements in this country that need to be protected if we're ever going to have any hope of saving what's left of our democracy and also saving the planet.
Thank you, bro. Thank you so much for that, Charlie Cray. And then we're going to say that to our people at the Progressive Radio Network, at Pacifica, and so many others that please make use of this. Charlie, go ahead from Greenpeace, my brother in arms here. In
Thanks,
nonviolent,
Harvey.
hugging
Thanks.
arms.
Yeah. Well, people can go to greenpeaceontrial.org as we update our strategy and all the relevant materials. We're obviously gathering our legal strategy primarily right now for the appeal, and that's our number one priority. We're talking with allies who will be organizing amicus briefs and so forth. Meanwhile, what we need we also need many other things. We've got to have anti-SLAPP legislation in every state, and at the national level. There's a coalition called Protect the Protest that has been pushing for the same kind of anti-SLAPP laws here in the U.S. as they have in Europe. And I want to say this is not a partisan issue. You have had people from one of the Koch leading front groups, Americans for Prosperity, as well as people like, I think, Ed Blum, was it? I forget the guy's name, who represented Citizens United in the big, lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court, Libertarian Republicans. So, we need that. We're going to be looking for support, rounding up allies like we did. We have an open letter for organizations that over 400 have signed. Many big unions, many big communities of faith organizations. We're happy to do briefings like this one for folks if they want, reach out to us. And we've been doing a series of webinars that will continue this Thursday night, and we'll keep going.
Charlie, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We need a revision to our Constitution based on Indigenous originalism. And in the meantime, you are all heroes. Thank you so much for being with us. We are going to continue, but for this hour, this has been the Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom Hall. We have more than 80 people with us. And to our heroes, Natalie, Steve, Charlie, keep the faith and we'll see you we'll see you in court and at Standing Rock. No nukes, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be in touch. And Steve, I'll be back there in May. We'll get together. And
Definitely. Thank you
Natalie,
so
thank you. And now I hope to get to Hawaii sooner rather than later. Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. No nukes. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve. Thank you for engineering this. We are going to continue now, another hour and 20 minutes. This was a fantastic session. And we're going to go now. We're joined by Roger Rapoport and by Tom English. Tom, if you can do, Roger has to stay till 6:30, has to leave at 6:30. We want your wonderful performance, Tom English. If you can do that at 6:30, that would be really great. I would really appreciate it. You good with that, Tom English? And then Roger Rapoport, we want to jump in now and talk about the fight in Michigan on this insane idea of restarting the Palisades nuclear plant. Are you with us, Roger? There you are.
Yeah. So,
Tom English, if you're with us, please stay till 6:30, and Roger's got to go then, and we will do your wonderful performance at that time. Okay, Roger Rapoport. Go Blue. Roger was, I actually helped appoint Roger Rapoport to be the editor of the University of Michigan Daily, causing a global uproar because Roger was such a great reporter that as a stripling youth, he managed to take down a trustee of the University of Michigan, period. But now you're in the West Coast of, you and I were both on West Coasts, and where the Palisades nuclear plant, which was shut, they now try and want to reopen, and they're trying to put in tons and tons of money. Can you talk about this insanity, Roger Rapoport, please?
So the Palisades nuclear power plant is very close to a very large metropolitan area, which has about more than 8 million people. It's located in Southwest Michigan near South Haven. It was first sold, and then by a utility here, Consumers Power, to a nuclear company, and basically, when they offloaded it, one of the reasons they got rid of it more than 20 years ago was that the plant had a lot of safety-related problems, especially with steam generator, and there were all sorts of things. So they brought in Energy, one of the largest fleet operators, who immediately found all kinds of safety-related problems, and eventually, about 2.5 years ago, unloaded it because the cost of repairs and they lost their lucrative power purchase agreements meant that it was financially they were unable to operate it. But thanks to a $300 million appropriation from the state of Michigan, Governor Whitmer, and the legislature, they've been able to take the plant from a decommissioning status to an attempted restart status. Now, keep in mind what that means. It doesn't mean they have a license to restart the plant. They don't have a permit to restart it. What they do have is a loan guarantee from the federal government for $1.5 billion to restart this plant. But there's a problem. They basically don't have permission from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to open the plant. And for many of the reasons that both Consumers Power and eventually Energy decided that they didn't want to operate it anymore, companies that experienced operators of these plants who really knew what they were doing. So Holtec, the company that was hired to decommission it and bought it as a private company based in New Jersey, they have never operated a nuclear power plant. They've never built one. They take 15 to 20 years to build. So the idea is that they're going to take this plant and restart it and operate it with what could amount to eventually $8 billion worth of federal funding and subsidies and grants and loans and so on. But there's a problem. The problem is that to Holtec's own analysis, the steam generators turn out to be much worse than expected. But instead of replacing them, they're trying to re-sleeve a lot of these tubes in the generator. And the job is enormous. It's controversial. It's never been done. And more to the point, they got this $1.5 billion loan guarantee, which works out to about $5 million a day. And since they got the guarantee, which was about over 100 days ago, a little more than that, about 120 days ago. They've so far only gotten a tiny fraction of that money, which means their lenders are out on the hook. And it doesn't look like now, based on a recent NRC hearing, that they're going to be able to make their deadline. Surprise. So as a result, the whole project is dragging. And while all this is going on, of course, other plants in Iowa, Three Mile Island and so forth, are trying to restart them too. And the reason all this is happening is because it's so expensive and it takes so long to build a nuclear plant that it's just really not feasible to start up a lot of new nuclear plants. So they're trying to revive the old ones, but it's just not working out.
It's like you've had a junker in your front yard
Right.
up on blocks for 5 years,
Right.
1970 Corvair or Pinto, and you want to restart it, and it's sheer lunacy.
But here's the great story, and this will absolutely fascinate all of you. Why is the Trump administration in bed with the Whitmer? Whitmer, I mean, after what Trump has said and done to Whitmer, the way he's totally destroying the state of Michigan's economy, the largest border crossing in America is Detroit and Windsor. Basically, all the auto industries are now, because of the new tariffs, Detroit is just being decimated, while the Secretary of Commerce is out appealing for people to run out and buy Tesla stock. And the White House driveway is now a Tesla lot. He is absolutely devastating the Detroit auto industry with all these tariffs and so forth. And meanwhile, Whitmer, our governor, is in bed with the Trump administration on this enormous subsidy for Holtec. And what makes it even more incredible is that while all this is going on, if you can believe this, the Trump administration is on record trying to tear down the American Recovery Act every way they can. In other words, if the money hasn't already been spent for solar or wind or other alternative energies, it's being stopped cold, except for nuclear power, where they just released this $57 million. But the problem is that that's only a tiny fraction of the money that the Democratic administration under Biden and Jennifer Granholm really, offered. So in other words, it's going very slowly in terms of their meeting their benchmarks to get this funding. So it's quite ironic that the Democrats and the Republicans have found common ground. And in the Michigan legislature, they've already given away the $300 million. I mean, that's money that Holtec is just using to kind of get off the ground, startup funds. They're just giving it away. So why would a Democratic governor get in bed with a Trump administration, energy administration? And the answer is very simple. Once again, as we've seen from the previous speaker, surprise, the tune is being called by these corporations that donate to both sides of the aisle. And I want to segue out of this for just a second. So you all remember a few days after we got our new president, we got a new Secretary of Transportation. On his first day in the job, when he started out, day one, he was in the Potomac River watching them carry the poor people who died in that American Airlines crash. Now, here's a question for you. And this goes to the bipartisan thing. Pardon me for segue. Okay, so why did that plane crash? Okay, there's a very good reason why it crashed. Number one, it wasn't on instruments. Okay, now guess what? In other words, it wasn't on an instrument approach. It was on a visual approach at night in one of the most crowded airspaces in the world, where helicopters are flying back and forth because they're training on how to evacuate the White House and other cabinet level officials. Those are the helicopters that are going to take them away when we're under attack or whatever. Okay, so it's a pretty important training mission. Okay, most crowded airspace, some of the most crowded airspace in the world. They're flying visual approaches with all of this trouble. If that plane had been landing in Paris, been landing in Dubai, if it had been landing in Tokyo, it wouldn't have crashed. And here's why: because everywhere else in the world, except in America, pilots have to land on instruments. Period. In all major airports in the world. So here's the question. Why on earth would we, in some of the most crowded airspace where our congressmen and our political leaders are flying in, not have an instrument approach? And the answer is very simple. The reason is that they allow and encourage visual approaches except in bad weather for a very simple reason. Because if they didn't, they don't have enough controllers to do instrument approaches. They'd have to slow down the number of landings. They'd have to cut the number of flights flying into Washington. And as a result of the fact that the FAA is underfinanced and that the airlines contribute a great deal of money to both sides of the political aisle, they're allowed to continue this mistake. And that plane crashed directly because we don't follow the flight procedures that are followed by airports all over the world. And my point is simply this, that when it comes down to it, the Democrats and the Republicans are in bed on all kinds of issues, and that's a good example. And you can guarantee that the airlines will not allow the FAA to switch to an instrument approach because, number one, they don't have enough controllers to do the job. And number two, they would have to slow down, cut their schedules, or fly bigger aircraft, have fewer planes in the air. And they don't want to lose money.
I have to point out that Roger made a major film. Roger made a major motion picture about the airlines, and so he really knows what he's talking about.
Well, let me say it again. If that same airplane had been landing in Toronto, those people would be alive. And that's an example of corporate power. The previous speaker who talked about going to jail. We're dealing with the entire state of Michigan that is in great financial trouble. We're about to lose, the city of Detroit alone is going to lose billions of dollars from the DOE, right? So we're in a financial crunch, and we're giving away $300 million, it's gone, to this company that has never built a nuclear power plant, a plant that one of the most experienced nuclear operators in the world has abandoned over safety issues. And the entire Michigan legislature and the governor, Democrats and Republicans, have joined the Trump administration to get this plant going, okay? So the answer is that one way or another, they've been bought off by somebody, and my guess is it might be some people in the nuclear energy. Now, I'm not saying they've all taken direct campaign contributions, but what I am saying is that they believe in this company that obviously, for some reason, they think is going to bring billions of dollars into the state of Michigan, and they're willing to take a chance on the safety of this.
Well, Roger, let me ask you a related question. You and I both went to the University of Michigan.
Right.
How did the people of Michigan who work in Ford and Chevy plants feel about Donald Trump pushing a Tesla cars? I mean, I thought it was insane. Didn't people in Michigan flip out over this?
Well, a lot of my friends, I have friends who've sold their Teslas. You know, they're getting out, and that's happening all over the country. But the point is that so far Trump has gotten $38 billion in federal subsidies, many billions of dollars under Biden for Tesla. You know, went out on the Biden administration. They subsidized Tesla hugely, and this is yet another example. At that point, of course, he was not where he is today. But obviously, we've been had.
Yes, I mean, I don't know. Did Trump think there are not other car companies in America that are competing? I mean, Ford and Chevy both have electric cars.
They do.
What wasn't this a slap at Detroit to do a car show with Tesla?
Yes.
Didn't people? Was there a reaction in Michigan to that?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, the rallies all over the country, including here in my town, we've had huge rallies, and you know, these are not partisan rallies. I mean, everybody, you know, it's both sides. But the point is that we're still at this point. We have a legislature and a governor that are buying into this. It's actually Musk's agenda. They want these old nuclear power plants restarted, and of course, they're seeing dollar signs, $8 billion. But there's a huge safety risk. I mean, that's why the previous owners of these plants got out because of the safety challenges. So it's just a classic example of the corporate power interests. You know, they see this as a cash for the state.
All right, let me say two quick things. In the next half hour, we're going to have a great presentation from Tom English, and then and Roger has to go at 6:30. In the next half hour, we're going to talk about lithium and Tesla. I do want to say, do not burn a Tesla car, please. That lithium is really, really toxic,
Right.
and it's a very, very bad situation, for God's sakes. Roger, I'm sure everybody wants to know. You're an expert in this. You've made this film. How safe is it now to fly? Has Musk done significant damage to the air traffic control system in the United States at this point in time?
Well, he was fined $10 million when one of the SpaceX rockets blew up in September. You remember that because a lot of planes had to scramble and some were running low on fuel. They had to go to different airports and so on. And one of the reasons the head of the FAA got fired was because Trump, decided that poor Musk, he was fighting this $10 million fine. And then, if you can believe it, another SpaceX rocket blew up again. The same thing happened in January, the same exact situation where they have to scramble the aircraft and so on. So he's getting fined, for his rockets blowing up in the middle of, obviously commercial airspace. And so that's caused yet another conflict of interest issue. But there was a big argument in Washington, in the cabinet meeting where he took on the head of Department of Transportation, and basically they fired a bunch of people at the FAA, and basically Musk was on the defense, playing defense now, and he said, "Well, no, we didn't fire any controllers," and which is true. And the head of the Department of Transportation said, "You're right. We didn't fire any because I wouldn't let you cancel any of them. So why are they firing hundreds of people in the FAA when this is going on? It doesn't make any sense. Is flying more dangerous than it was before Trump took over? I put it this way: until they meet the standard that every other airport in the world does, which is requiring aircraft to land on instruments, we're at risk." And I want to add this note. Why are the planes not able to have conflict avoidance when they have, TCAS systems, which basically prevent collisions, right? The whole way the FAA got started was because there was a collision over the Grand Canyon in '56, the CAA, the predecessor of the FAA. There was a plane crash over the Grand Canyon, and that's what led to increased federal regulation. So the question that needs to be asked is, why don't all planes simply turn on their collision avoidance system to the ground? And the answer is, in the last 1,000 feet, the collision avoidance system picks up aircraft that are on the ground and they get false positives. So they have to turn off the TCAS collision avoidance system because they'll get false alerts and it won't work. So during that last 1,000 feet, everywhere else in the world, the tower takes control of the plane, and the controllers have automation, radar, and so forth, where they can see potential conflicts in the most dangerous part of the flight. That's when more than 40% of landing accidents happen in the last part of the flight on visual approach. So obviously you want to have an instrument approach, but you have to have enough people in the tower to be able to manage these landing aircraft to avoid conflict. And that night in Washington, one of the controllers went home early. They were understaffed, and they had a controller who was handling this flight who'd already given it permission to land visually and had moved on to other aircraft. He was overworked. So until that situation changes, we're at more risk than we'd be landing in a foreign airport.
Well, it's terrifying, and it's absolutely avoidable, as you say. One of the worst things of the many horrible things that Ronald Reagan did was fire all those air traffic controllers. Right. We had a friend from Columbus, Libby, who was killed in a completely avoidable crash at LAX. Right. At LAX, for God's sakes. And it was absolutely 100% because of the air traffic control attack that Ronald Reagan launched against organized labor. And now, I'm just horrified that we're going to start to see planes falling out of the sky here.
And I want to add this footnote. Trump used it as a campaign thing. As soon as before they were still retrieving the bodies, he was out explaining that it was all DEI. He knew it was a DEI accident. Well, actually, the truth is that no one can be a controller under any circumstances unless they pass an extremely tough exam. They need years of training, which the government pays for, by the way. And then after the training, from the people who start, who actually end up being controllers, after a 5-year process, only 2% of the people who enter aircraft controller training actually end up being controllers. So it's a complete lie that anyone is a controller because of their ethnicity. It's absolutely not true. They all have to pass the same test. So this is a classic example that builds on the whole fallacy that it's somehow the result of DEI. But a lot of people swallow it.
Well, I'm really, really worried about the air traffic control system, having lost Libby Gregory, and seeing and then right away this crash happened, which you're the first person I've heard analyze it in those terms. That it would be specific. Have you written about this? You need
Yes,
to write an article
I
about
have
it.
written about it. Yeah, I've written
Can
about
you
it.
post a link to
Yeah,
this?
I have a link I'll post right now. Yeah. It's in the
Amazing.
San Francisco Chronicle. And if you can believe it, uh, there's actually a prequel to this. The same thing happened in San Francisco in 2013, exactly the same thing, where a plane that should have been in instruments was landing and visually, and the tower wasn't controlled, and the pilots got confused. In my article, I'm going to post a link right now. So they've known about it for years. It's not a secret. And the great irony is that the worst, probably the worst one of the worst airports in the world is Reagan Airport, ironically named for the guy who fired all the traffic controllers
Yeah, really.
and set the industry back, decades. I mean, how ironic.
I mean, how he could justify firing air traffic controllers in the middle of all this, and now we're seeing it again. So then the question, I want to revert. I know you got to go, Roger, very quickly on the nuclear, and we're getting the second hour. We're going to have a quick performance by the great Tom English, and then we're going to talk about lithium and Tesla, because that's a very, very big issue. Those of us have been working on. We do not want lithium to become the new plutonium. But Roger, the money that Biden set aside, the billions that he set aside
Right.
for nuclear, is that going to all get untouched now with Trump? Is that
You
all
mean
gonna sail
is
through?
Trump going to do a carve out for nuclear? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, is he going to, all this Doge garbage? Is he going to exempt the money that Biden set aside for nuclear and let that fly through?
Well, that's what he's talking about. But he has already done it for this one. He just put out, 57 million for Holtec, which is a fool's errand to begin with, and that doesn't make any sense, But I think more to the point, and this is the thing about Musk that nobody. I just posted the link, by the way, that explains the whole aviation thing, and I'm going to put another link up too. This is what Musk wants. It's what Bezos wants. It's what Mark Zuckerberg wants. They want nuclear power to fuel AI, okay? And they've realized that it takes 15 to 20 years to build a new nuclear power plant, and they can't compete with solar or wind or any of the alternative energies. So they're doing this backpedaling, and I believe it's Facebook that's behind the 3 Mile Island restart. And then, of course, you have the so-called small nuclear reactor guy and Bill Gates, who's trying to get money. But the point of all this is all the money is coming from the federal and state government. At the same time, they're trying to doge out all these employees. They're taking all this federal and state money and throwing it at nuclear power, which, of course, is not clean green energy. It never was. And so that's a complete myth that it's carbon free. It's not. So from an environmental standpoint, it doesn't make sense. From an economic standpoint, it doesn't make sense. And from a safety point, it doesn't compete at all with alternative energy. So
Well, let's see that it's the ultimate hypocrisy, allegedly saving federal money and then throwing it nuclear. Roger, it's always great to have you with us. I forgot that you were an expert on aviation. That's a big deal. We're gonna have to have you back to talk about that and about Tesla and this nuclear plant. So, Roger Rapoport, thank you so much for being with us.
thank you very much.
And I got two things to say to you: no nukes and go blue.
Go blue.
Okay, man. Talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Talk about cults. The cult that no one ever mentions is the alumni of the University of Michigan, which is the biggest cult in America. But there you go. Okay. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. Yeah,
Come
thanks.
back again. All right, we're going to switch in a couple minutes now to talk about Tesla and lithium. Lithium is an absolute sleeper issue that we've really got to deal with in these cars and stand on batteries. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But we do have the great performance artist, Tom English, with us. Tom, can you unmute and open up so we can see you here? Tom English, where are you?
Unmute.
There you are.
Yeah,
There's Tom
can you
English.
see me? Because I can't. This is just like a logo here. Can you see me?
We can see your name. So, but you're going to do a performance, an audio performance for us. Is that
Okay.
right?
But yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I just wish I got to get this together so next time you can see me. But
All
sure.
right. Well, listen, you gave a performance that really knocked me out. There was a wonderful birthday celebration for a great activist in Santa Monica. Mimi Kennedy spoke, Jane Fonda spoke. It was really a beautiful event, and you did this thing to America's CEOs. So it's probably the only poem ever written to America's billionaire CEOs. Tom is a great performer, by the way. I'm sorry we can't see him, but we will in the future. Tom, we didn't have our Mimi Gurman poem today. We want you to be our poet laureate. And can you do your thing for America's CEOs? And then we're going to go to Tesla, fittingly enough.
Okay. CEOs, you're human too. And we, the people, need you to stand for clean water, stand for clean air, do all you can do to guard the resources we need to survive from entities that are not even alive, because corporate entities, they got no skin in the game. CEOs, you're each one of us. You need clean water and air, because CEOs, without those things, even you would not be there. Your own grandchildren, son and each daughter, your spouse and yourself will need clean air and water. Corporate entities, they got no skin in the game. Corporate entities, they can never die. So war corporations love drones in the sky, because all corporations move merchandise, and war is brisk business with all those supplies. And if there should ever be lack of demand, just get some bombs into some hothead's hand. When incidents happen, they set back and sell to both sides. And now we're all battling doubt and despair. There's no way these entities can ever really care. They're persons under law, but there's nobody there. They're just marks of ink on some paper somewhere, and calling them persons can never change their spots. There's still no more persons than any lines or blots. But you are humankind, and you have a human mind, and you call the shots. So CEOs, let's just suppose you defend the resources we need. Show how you hold humanity over unbridled non-human greed. And when you see you are obviously the only human person in the room, put every buck you can on the American clean, green, economic bloom. We, the people, will praise you in all kinds of ways, and the whole world will love you the rest of your days. All of history, too, will be all about you if you rise and come through, because you're human. You.
Wow, that was fantastic. Wonderful. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Tom English.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate that. Next, have you back. You'll do another one next time. We'll be able to see you.
Okay, great.
You
I
should
loved
be
it
able
when
to
you. I
start
loved it
video
when you
now.
did that. What's that?
Try and start your video now, Tom. You should be able to unless you
Well,
have a
here we
computer.
are. We'll do it next time.
I don't know why I couldn't do it. I'm gonna keep putzing with it till I get it corrected. I'm sorry, you guys.
That's
Oh,
Anyway,
okay.
it was great. I'm really, really loving all of it. You know, Roger was just amazing. Just now. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Stuff
Yeah.
is
You're
so
better than Tom Lear.
Yes, and Tom, you're really great. Oh, if you have the lyrics and could put them in the chat, that would be wonderful. That's a
Sure.
brilliant, brilliant piece of work. Really, really great. So thank you so much, and we'll have you back with your actual picture. Actually, just by disclosure, Tom English is actually 6'10", and he looks exactly like LeBron James. So there you go. No, I'm kidding.
I wish.
All right.
Anyway,
Thank
okay,
you so
great.
much, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, listen, we still have a great, great, great crew with us, and I do want, and thank you, Roger Rapoport, again. I want to jump in now and talk about an issue with Tesla and with lithium. Lithium is the main ingredient in these batteries. They're lithium-ion batteries, and they're in the cars all over the world, and they're in standalone batteries. And I was going to put a solar system on my house in the valley here. And thanks to Gavin Newsom, the company went bankrupt. I signed a contract, but they're gone. And involved in the contract was a Tesla battery for the house. All houses that have solar now should have batteries for when they complain about, when the sun doesn't shine at night. And so if you have solar on your roof, you can get through the day, obviously. And then after 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, when the sun goes down, your battery has been charged and you get through the night. And it's not rocket science, but the batteries that Tesla is putting out are lithium. And last week we had, an absolutely horrifying, and Tatanka is a neighbor here, discussion. And Joe Murphy Long is on with us, by the way, who's had similar experience at 3 Mile Island. After the accident at 3 Mile Island in March of 1979, in January of 1980, I went in and I interviewed people about whether they'd been harmed on the radiation. It was the worst week of my life. Just horrifying to hear the cancers, leukemias, hair falling out, all this other terrible health effects. And now this battery place blew up in Moss Landing, California, and the people's stories are deja vu all over again. The health impacts are horrifying. I know Dennis Bernstein is on or was on, has been dealing, probably the only guy in radio land dealing with these realities, and the health impacts are horrifying from lithium. And I know Anna György is with us, who was involved in fighting a proposed lithium battery facility in Western Massachusetts, which I believe you've stopped, thankfully. But lithium is not sustainable. And it's at the core of the green revolution, green power revolution, with all these batteries and these electric cars. And during the fires here in LA, a lot of Teslas burned in Pacific Palisades and Altadena. And this is not cool. The toxic residue from a lithium fire is lethal and unsustainable. And so the question now becomes, but lithium is being used, and there are obviously mining issues, labor issues with lithium, and with these cars and these battery backups and this very large battery facility at Moss Landing that should never have been burned. Complete negligence. And the fallout is terrible. So here we are supporting a green power revolution to get rid of nuclear power and to have a cleaner environment, but it's being powered with batteries that have lithium in it. And Dennis Bernstein, on your great Pathway show on KPFA, which is syndicated nationwide, you've interviewed some of these people. Do you want to tell us about this and give the right name for your show, which I just botched?
Hey, Harv, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you? Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Incredibly important subject. I'm glad I managed to grab a piece of the presentation today. Always very important. I actually, now that I got you cornered, I'm hoping you can join us on Flashpoints today because we're going to hear Keith McHenry he's been personally affected, Keith McHenry, Food Not Bombs, and there's a number of people who have been hurt by the fires, and the gravity of the wounds is simply not being talked about. So we're going to be talking about that, and I'm going to ask you for your response.
Absolutely. I'm happy to come on.
He's got a lot going, but it's been profoundly serious. Santa Cruz going south, and people don't want to talk about it. And a lot of people who need help in terms of the information I'm getting cannot get help because they don't even understand what it is that happened.
Well, the battery facility, is a very big deal. It's a big part of the plan to switch to renewables, but we can't have lithium in these batteries. The good news is that sodium will work. Sodium is cheaper, safer, cleaner, more reliable in these battery arrays than lithium. And there are mining issues with lithium, and the cars. I mean, I know people are out protesting Tesla, but you can't burn a Tesla car. That stuff is devastating. I know Anna did a lot of work, and I want to congratulate you on having this on Flashpoints, Dennis. You're definitely one of the very few radio people who's covering this issue. And the people in the Green New Deal don't like to hear about this. But we cannot let lithium become the new plutonium. It's really serious stuff, which I never realized until those folks came on last week on the GREEP call here. And how safe are lithium iron phosphate batteries? Well, that's a different part of lithium. But yes.
Not to mention the implications for the extractors and where these minerals are. Obviously, once again, it's a slaughter in indigenous communities, territories. Here we go again. And as we watch Trump turn the clock back, there are a lot of people who are concerned.
It's terrible. It's really bad. And the good news about sodium, among the other things, and this seems to always be the case, what's good for the earth turns out to be economically superior. Sodium iodide batteries, as opposed to lithium iodide batteries, are an order of magnitude cheaper. They are much, much cheaper.
Yes.
And they're not as light yet. In other words, they're not quite suitable for electric cars the way lithium is. Lithium is superior in the short term, but I get a sense that the technology will proceed.
Michael Anonymous. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Can I say something?
Please. Yes.
Okay, I just want to say I have a very close friend who is a contractor and an ex-rock star who knows all about battery technology, and you're right about the sodium batteries. He says that they're really safe, but he also told me that, and this is happening with Toyota. Toyota's coming out with an EV SUV for $13,000, and they're instead of using lithium that has lithium ion batteries, they're using lithium phosphate minus cobalt, which is radioactive and which is far, far less toxic. Now, I don't know, I'm just telling you what I know, that this one's far safer than the other one. And the Chinese have been starting to use it, and they're using it in Japan, and the new Toyota SUV coming out that they're going to undercut Tesla with for $13,000 for 2026 is coming out. So,
wow, look at that. Yeah, I saw this the other day. I did a fair amount of research on this, and sodium basically is everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not lithium. It's not toxic if it's done right. And remember these three letters, BYD, build your dream. That is the Chinese car company that's going to wipe out Tesla. I don't think Tesla is going to be in business in a few years. And I also want to say that Gavin Newsom has made this big thing banning gas-fired cars in California in 2035. Nobody is going to be buying a gas-fired car in 10 years. I mean, they are completely priced out of the market now. BYD, everywhere on earth, you'll be able to, except the United States, you'll be able to buy a BYD electric powered sedan for 15 grand. That's what they're selling for now. And so all this lithium, and Anna fought a big lithium battery factory in Western Mass. Anna György, do you want to comment on this? Thank you, Paul, for that.
Excuse me, this is Michelle Fairbairn. You asked me to unmute.
Oh,
I have my hand raised.
if you were before Anna, do you mind? Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I'm just commenting because I had noticed a year ago, in March 25th, 2024, there was an article in the Christian Science Monitor. It's uplifting news from around the globe, eco-friendly batteries and greener cement. And anyway, I'm just looking at a copy I made of the. Anyway, it says, also known as aqueous metal ion batteries. The technology is being used to explore as a safer alternative to industry standard lithium ion batteries.
Yes.
It was water, they call it water batteries. While found in everything from phones to electric vehicles, lithium batteries carry a risk of fire and explosion, making them less suitable for large-scale energy storage.
Yes.
Aqueous
absolutely.
metal ion batteries replace the volatile components with water, enabling electric current flow and eliminating the risk of fire. The researchers have struggled with dendrites, spiky metallic formations that can cause the battery to short circuit. In a recent study led by Australia's Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, engineers coated battery parts with bismuth and rust, which protected against dendrites. While lithium ion batteries can be difficult to recycle, researchers said that water batteries can be easily disassembled and reused. They also noted that water batteries have shown stable, renewable than lithium.
Hey,
yeah.
So
Sluggo,
there
Michelle?
are alternatives out there,
Yes.
but they don't seem to get as much publicity.
Well, I think the sodium iodine, sodium ion batteries now are really going to come into the news, and you know, because this is a huge transition. They're literally a tenth the cost.
Sluggo,
yeah,
can we ask Michelle to drop the link to that article in the chat?
Yes, Michelle, please put that link in the chat. And Anna György, you got your hand, and Anna's a great activist in Western Massachusetts. Go ahead, Anna.
Hi. Well, I was so pleased to see the focus and the connection between nuclear and lithium, because it's very similar in that silver bullet. We have the answer and we're going to put it everywhere, you know, and we were able to learn about it and educate our community, but it was really important for all of the people who are affected by lithium battery storage. The Moss Landing was compared to 3 Mile Island, and that is really important. So I want to make 2 points. One is lithium, there are alternatives, and that is mini grids, local connections, and conservation. And we have to think about that, not just endless storage of endless supply of electricity. The second thing is, we just discovered that in the nearby real city in Western Mass of Springfield, there's a plan to use a former power plant as a lithium storage battery. It is also on an aquifer. It is next to the Connecticut River. So I really appreciated last week's show, and I think it should be spread widely, about how the pollution affects land and crops and, you know, food for America. We just can't let this new form of solution, silver bullet, make it. And the last thing I wanted to say is, similar to nuclear power, there's a whole chain. You know, what's happening in Ukraine, they want the lithium. There's beautiful areas in the western part of the US that are being sacrificed for lithium exploitation, so that we have to see it as international and an entire chain, from the mining to the so-called recycling and try and really halt this, this.
Right. Well, Anna was participated in the birth of the No Nukes movement there at Montague Farm way back when. She was a mere teenager at the time, of course, but the slogan is we don't want lithium to be the new plutonium. I mean, this is serious stuff. And that's why last week we talked about the potential health effects of rooftop solar. There are issues that have to be going forward. We don't want to create another Frankenstein, like they thought nuclear power was going to be the great answer and turned out to be a nightmare. So we don't want to.
Conservation is where it's at, less power and not allowing this extension of AI and data processing centers,
Right. Of course, we found, and thankfully at this time, because of this thing, DeepSeek, we're finding that these data centers don't need anywhere near the power that they say they need. This DeepSeek is, again, taken down the potential power requirements of AI, et cetera, by, an order of magnitude. So it's a big deal. We can't just walk with our eyes, closed into a new era of craziness. So Anna, you've actually it's the battery facility that you were fighting in Wendell. Is it done? Did you win?
On August 6th, the New Leaf company withdrew their proposal, which we had just come from Hiroshima Nagasaki commemoration, and we heard the news that they had withdrawn it. They will never say it's because the population didn't want it, but it's really hard in Massachusetts because the state is overriding local permitting, and we're involved in that fight now. But this I just read the article about this Springfield plant, the one that's like on an aquifer next to the river. And the local fire chief said he had never seen 100% popular opposition to a project before. So let's just hope. Same thing with Trump, resistance, and just keep on educating and,
Well, let's remember also the cell towers. We work with Camilla Reese on these calls, and there is 704 No More, which is this movement. When they passed the Clinton-Gore Telecommunications Act, they made it illegal for local communities to raise health issues about cell towers. I mean, what are you thinking, for God's sakes? And so when you deal with this in Massachusetts, got to raise that issue, and do be in touch with me. It's very powerful, and there are a lot of people working on it. And we hopefully, I mean, in my town when I was living in Ohio, they stuck a cell tower on the school, and the football field.
No, it's happening in our area too, which is a very pristine rural area, and people are opposing it.
Well, there you go. So
absolutely.
Contact me, Anna. We'll be in touch, and I'll put you in touch with Camilla. That's it's right in sync with what you're doing. And but this lithium thing is very, very serious. And I think that the economics really should have knocked nuclear power out right from the start. But it was tied to the weapons industry. When Admiral Rickover built Shippingport, the first commercial reactor, he was with the Navy, and it was done with Westinghouse. And he said in public, this technology will never be both safe and economical. You can't do it. This is from Rickover, right at the start. So here we are, pushing to end nuclear power, and we're confronting a solar technology that works, but can't be sustained because it's not safe. And we got to deal with this in the batteries. And on our side is the convenient fact, just as solar is at least an order of magnitude cheaper than nuclear, sodium is an order of magnitude cheaper than lithium. And so we gotta face this reality. Okay, Anna, you got a last word there? We're almost, and Dennis, you're still on if you want to jump in. Dennis, I will come on with you. Just let me know what time you want.
Just educate and fight back, let people know.
And
That's
remember, we win, and remember this movie about our farm, Far Out, that is out there. People can ask me about that. We call it the Naked Hippie movie. Thankfully, I'm
well,
not.
we've got there's a new movie Sluggo called Acres of Clams, and it's
Oh,
free on the clamshellalliance.org website.
oh,
And
put
it's
that in the
like
chat.
a homemade movie of the development of the Clamshell Alliance back in the late 70s, taking off from our fight in Western Mass through the Seabrook National and International. And it's great to see all those young people. That was us like 50 years ago, you know.
God,
And
did we really look like that?
we were in it too, you know. And it really, we hope that it will inspire people to feel that change is possible, and we need that feeling now more than so.
What's the
Let's
website for the film, Anna? What's the website?
www.clamshell.org.
That's it,
I
clamshell.org.
think so. Yeah, or you could go to Acres of Clams film.
Oh,
Acres of
if
Clams
I've
is the
got a link
song.
down there if you want to check it out. It's a
Okay, great.
YouTube link right above the Solartopia.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But tell them, if you know these folks, tell them to share it as a Creative Commons license. Because anytime somebody shares something that's not on YouTube, they get whacked.
Well,
You know,
I think it is. I think it is because it's free, and
Well,
we're
you just
we're
put
well,
it
it's free, but I went there and looked and I checked it out and I didn't see a Creative Commons license on
okay.
it. It
I
usually
will let
shows
them
up.
know. Thank you. We're going to
This
show
needs to get
in
out in the
Greenfield.
media.
Yeah, we're showing in Greenfield on Earth Day, so it's a good thing to show on Earth Day because it's really popular power, and it also shows how just so many individuals made it happen. You know, it was
Well, we won. We won it. The Montague nuclear plants were never built. We beat Unit 2 at Seabrook. They did get Unit 1 on, but we got it down. And my favorite, one of my favorite, oh, look at that. That was us, folks. We looked like that. Believe it or not. You know, my favorite statistic, or one of my favorite statistics in American history, is that in 1974, Richard Nixon got on national TV before he got thrown out and said there would be 1,000 nuclear plants in the United States by the year 2000. And in the year 2000, there were 104. Too many, but we beat 196 nuclear plants, and that's what we got to do now. And we got to wait out somehow and get through Donald Trump, which I think we will. But we are going to be tested. You know, the thing about Donald Trump is they are forcing us to appreciate everything that we've had all these years, starting with democracy, small d. And we're going to have to fight tooth and nail, but we will become acquainted with what we've taken for granted for all these years, and that's what we got to do. So, and Anna's a big part of it.
But it has to be better. There was a lot that was wrong and a lot of people ignored. And I think we shouldn't just fight back. We should say another world is possible and we're going to fight for that.
And necessary. Another world is not only possible, it's necessary.
Hey, just look at the climate. You know, I mean, how many, you know, let's not wait any longer.
So listen, we got 4 o'clock Pacific time. We still got 50 people with us. Anna, it's just a joy to have you with us.
Thank
you. You'll be back, and we will talk more about lithium. But you know, like I say, I was on the brink of putting a Tesla battery at my house. You know, when you put in solar, you put in a battery generally, and you know,
that's different. That's different from the battery storage, because what the alternative to battery storage is actually having it decentralized in your cars and in your homes.
Right.
So that there's a democratic alternative to these massive, you know, battery storage. And so that's something we're working on too.
Well, in a certain sense, I hate to say this, I welcome the new technology, but the Chinese in the past week have announced a car, a viable automobile with a sodium battery, and B, and it's ridiculously cheap. I mean, it's under 20 grand for.
But they won't let it in, right? I mean,
we won't, but it's, you know, the American auto industry is dead thanks to Trump. You know, you can keep out the Chinese cars, but you can't keep them out of Europe. You can't keep them out of Africa or Asia, BYD, this company, is selling the equivalent of Toyota's Corollas, whatever, for 15 grand. And what they did last week, they announced that they can fully charge a car battery for 300 miles in 5 minutes, less time than it takes to pump your gas. And the batteries are going to be sodium, not lithium. So, where is the American auto industry? And as we mentioned before, what is the President of the United States turning the White House into a showroom for Tesla? Whatever happened to Chevy and Ford? Are those American cars? So the bottom line is we will not be selling, the American auto industry will have zero sales in South America, Europe, Asia, Africa going forward. It's Australia.
Maybe Canada will make an agreement with China, and that'll be our new.
Oh, absolutely, they will. Do you think a Canadian is ever going to buy another American car? I mean, come on. Of course, the Canadian cars will be running on maple syrup, but that's a different story. And they'll be pulled by mooses. Dennis Bernstein.
I'm not sure if I want the White House to be a showroom for anything.
Well, yes.
And I think there's a contest for the all new low and all that.
Yeah, really.
Turning the White House into a showroom and showing 4 different cars and then him choosing one. Come on.
And let's also point out that probably the ugliest car ever made is that truck he made. That thing looks like an armored car. They have had 8 recalls on that vehicle. 8! And 100% of those Tesla trucks are being recalled. I can barely articulate this because they basically glued on the side panels. And people are driving down the road and the panels are falling off into the highway. They sold like 40,000, all of them, every single one of Elon Musk's this truck that he are being recalled. Every one of them, because the side panels are falling off. This is not a small little, light in the car. The panels are falling off as they're driving down the highway. For God's sakes, are you kidding me? And this is the great master of our more efficient government, and threatening our safety as we fly now. I mean, oh my God. Anyway, does anybody else want to jump in? We're almost out of time. We still have 51 people with us. Anna, it's so wonderful to have you.
Hey, Harv, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to ask you later 5 things people need to know about lithium and all that stuff. We'll talk to you later. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, Dennis, and thank you for doing that show. And I will be joining you. So thanks a lot. It's always great to be on.
We're looking forward to that.
Flashpoints is the song, and it's nationally syndicated. So there you go. And Tom English is still with us. Thank you, Tom. I do want to emphasize that we cannot jump in to a solartopian revolution with lethal chemicals. And had it not been for the good people who came on and talked to us last week about their nightmare, their 3 Mile Island of Moss Landing, we wouldn't have known of it. We do have with us Jill Murphy Long. Jill, I want to acknowledge you. You're a very good filmmaker, and you have made a film about 3 Mile Island. Do you want to very quickly tell us about this film and put in the chat how people can see it?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Harvey. Actually, it's not out yet. I wrote a screenplay for a feature film, kind of an Aaron Brockovich meets Dark Waters, just to expose what happened to us at 3 Mile Island. I was only 15 when 3 Mile Island melted down in 1979. So I'm speaking with Hollywood now and also some European film production companies. I also created what they call it a pitch deck for Powerhouse, which will be, again, why nuclear is not safe, clean, and green, but also why we need to transition to renewable now, like other countries are doing successful. So that would be a documentary TV show. So,
but you experienced, there's still the industry, the nuclear industry is still saying that no one was harmed at 3 Mile Island. You were. And can you tell us very quickly about some of the health damage that was done at 3 Mile Island by the radiation that the nuclear industry is still denying, especially as they want to restart Unit 1, which is beyond insane.
Right, right. No, so the Pennsylvania Department of Health did do a test. They only did it for the first 18 years following the meltdown. And that's too soon because we were exposed to iodine radiation, which we know through the American Cancer Society, the Department of Veteran Affairs, the NIC, the CDC, they all list on their websites that exposure causes cancers of the soft organs of the bodies and neurological diseases like MS and tumors of the brain and central nervous system. We've been testing on our soldiers since Nevada test sites and then also bombing up the Pacific Ocean. So it's like, where do you draw the line that go, okay, well, we'll pay some of the soldiers that were there and we'll pay some of the downwinders that were around, Nevada, but nothing really happened in Pennsylvania because you can't see it, you can't smell it, can't taste it, you can't feel it on your skin. That said, we have over 5,000 people who have been on you can look it up or I can put it in the chat. We have a Facebook survivor group and there's 5,000 people talking about what happened to them. I went back there several times and had people sit down and fill out testimonials. And I have over 200 people but what they do is they get on one testimonial and then they'll talk about themselves and then their brother and their mother and the next door neighbor. So each testimonial has like 5 or 6 people in each one. So I've actually plotted that on Google Map. I've shared that in the chat and I can share it again. I had a brain tumor in 2012, thyroid cancer in 2023. My younger brother had a brain tumor, then basal cell carcinoma, and then thyroid cancer. And then of the 6 houses, we are on a creek that comes off the Susquehanna River. There's 26 diagnoses in 6 houses. Wow. That's just in my neighborhood. In Pen Oaks South, which is up on the ridge, we're about 600 feet above the valley floor. We can see 3 Mile Island. So we're in direct view. So we're about 13 miles as a bird flies. Mike and I were out playing, running track the day TMI melted down on March 28th. We came home and delivered the York Dispatch newspaper as we did for 6 years. We were a local delivery boy and girl. So I know all my neighbors and I went around and knocked on the door last time I was home and some didn't want to talk about it. They were afraid that, if they got shut down, they would take their house, it basically is criminal with what they got away with because of the latent nature of being exposed to iodine radiation. It shows up decades later, and I can show case after case after case. So, because I can't control what's happening with Hollywood to get them to see this is an important story, I'm writing a book, and I'm pulling together all the groups throughout not only Pennsylvania, but the country where this is happening. So it's just not happening in my backyard, and that's what I'm working on now. So I hope to get a literary agent this year. Mine unfortunately passed during COVID. This is my 6th book that I'm writing. So I'll have this out, fingers crossed next year.
Jill, it's very important that you exchange notes now with the people downwind from Moss Landing. We need to make the connection for, the health impacts of radiation with the health impacts of lithium. We can't introduce the world here to a new plutonium in the name, of a green-powered Earth. So, we have got to, and people don't understand how to do what you've done, which is, homespun epidemiology. I mean, that's what Erin Brockovich did, the woman at West Valley, Lois Gibbs, all the great research that came on the health impacts of atomic radiation was started by women in the communities that were harmed by, you had Jane Lee and Mary Osborne, who I knew very well. And, I can name you other communities where the women, the mothers stepped forward and said, well, look at San Luis Obispo, the Mothers for Peace fighting Diablo Canyon. It's the same thing. I mean, the environmental movement has basically been a women's movement. And so it's critical that the skills, the epidemiological skills that you have picked up in central Pennsylvania be translated now to the area around Moss Landing. We have Tataka Bricka on the call, who's living in that area, and we really need to exchange notes on that because people need to be able to do their own health studies. I mean, we got no help whatsoever from the government in central Pennsylvania when tracking down the health impacts of 3 Mile Island until Columbia University did a study, and their numbers clearly showed horrendous health impacts, and they came out and said, well, nothing's really definitive, and we need to do more studies. It was utter nonsense. So, this is, unfortunately, this is familiar territory. And if you will be of great help to the people downwind from Moss Landing. So maybe you can be in touch with Tatanka and put your contacts in the chat. That would be really good. Okay?
Okay, I did. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jill. And keep in touch with us. Does anyone else? It's 4:13 here, California, 7 minutes to toke up time. Does anybody else want to jump in before we say good night and we'll see you next week? Anybody else got anything to say? Okay, let's rock and roll. We will be back next.
Sorry to be
Myla, there you
slow.
are. Yeah, hi, Myla.
I do have something to say, and that is that let's just tell people if they know anyone in Wisconsin, early
Oh,
voting
yeah.
right now.
Wisconsin.
We were going to say a few words about Wisconsin. It's an extremely consequential election. The last day to vote is April 1st, and it could impact the balance of power in Congress by virtue of the gerrymandering that might be reverted back to or not be overcome if this very important and by the way, let me just say that Elon Musk is reputed to be pouring in something like $100 million
Right.
into this election. You probably want to say more about it, Harvey, but I just wanted to remind
Yes, and wow, I'm really glad you caught that, Myla. Thank you. This election, what they proved in 2024 is that you can buy an election. And Elon Musk this is a hugely important election for the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. I didn't realize that April 1st was the last time to vote. I thought we had another month. But he will do anything to prevent people from voting in certain areas, as we know, and make sure that people in other areas get their votes counted. And, it's a demographic manipulation that they do, as well as with the machines themselves. And we will see that they're going to spend any amount of money that they can to hold on to this gerrymandered nightmare in Wisconsin. Steve Caruso, thank you, Ann, for
We've
that.
seen speculation, and a lot of the actual election scientists don't like speculation, but the fact that one of Doge boys had a program that could create ballot images, and some of us are thinking that is how they fixed the election in the swing state. They injected ballot images that weren't proper, and obviously,
Right.
anyway.
But we know for sure, certain, there's no speculation about the massive disenfranchisement that, Greg
Obviously,
Palast
yes.
so clearly, and it's been going on since Florida 2000, Ohio 2004, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania 2016, and then again in 2024, certainly in Georgia, where millions of people were denied their right to vote. And that's what they're going to do in Wisconsin. We're 100% sure. We do have a guidebook, People's Guide to Election Protection, which we can put the link up. But that's what's going to happen with Wisconsin. We know we're up against it because the power of money is what it is.
We got to keep in mind that these folks might pull the same stunt. So
they will.
Not that they haven't technically got caught in the 2024 election, but somebody's got to figure out and keep their hand on the throttle and watch what's going on up in Wisconsin. They've been jerked around so much in the past for elections for years, and I think the people are totally tired of it. So the
Absolutely.
other thing is, remember, Elon Musk said that we'll coup whoever you want, deal with it, and he's not playing around, obviously. And if he did steal this past election, God bless his soul. That's all I say.
Well, they definitely stole it by disenfranchising the public. That's what they did in 24. Donald Trump would not have won in an election with a fair turnout, and the Democrats don't do anything. They just do not deal with it except to attack us. When Bob Petrakis and I started showing how 2004 in Ohio was stolen, the Republicans couldn't have cared less what we were saying, but the Democrats always attacked us, and here we are again. Paul Sherman, if you can be quick, that'd be great.
Very quick. Good to see everybody. You, Sluggo, Tatanka, everybody here. Thanks. It's been a while. And if you haven't known, up here, I'm in Santa Clara County over there. We just had Ro Khanna come and give a town hall that was fill the capacity. Never seen that before. And I wasn't even able to get in. And standing outside, listening to a live stream with Amy, met some people and with a YouTube live stream broadcast. And just want to say, Sluggo, Catherine Avila absolutely loves. She's sporting a Ukraine button, and she loves what you wrote on Ukraine. That's
thank you.
She loves it, and she'll be in touch with you. I give her your email.
Well,
And
please,
go ahead.
and everybody, thank you, Paul. Everybody do the research here. Whatever happened to the Budapest Memorandum? You know, the people of Ukraine gave up their atomic weapons. Never happened before.
She mentioned that.
Yes, turned over 1,600 warheads to Russia in exchange for a guarantee of peace. And what's going on now? It's ridiculous. Paul, thank you for that. And good to hear about.
And then right now, if you haven't seen, it's not getting a lot of press. In closing, the VTA, Valley Transportation Authority, all light rails, all buses have been on strike. It's the third week, and the agency is not budging. They want to take away. It's mostly job security and protection, not so much wages.
Yes, and also I hope at the Rokana gathering that the organizers got everybody's name and email and phone numbers if possible. We have got to follow up on these rallies. These rallies, these public gatherings cannot be photo ops anymore. They've got to be organizing opportunities. Paul, thank you. Good to hear from you. Everybody, we will see you next week. It's 4:20, time to toke up and enjoy the rest of your day. This has been another phenomenal session, and we will come back. And Joe, I do want to specifically have you talk directly next week to the people from Moss Landing. Maybe Tatanka can help organize that, okay? If you'll come back, we would appreciate it. Ruth Strauss, great to see you. Great to see everybody. No nukes, everybody. Ron Leonard will talk. Tom English, thanks for your great performance. We will have you on video next time. And I have to say, you really don't look like LeBron James, but so we'll see what you really look like at your next performance. No nukes, everybody. We'll see you next week. Take care.
No nukes.
Caruso.